Welcome to Reach the World ASAP. My name is Pastor Scott Griswold. I am delighted to bring you another fascinating story of someone who caught the inspiration of Jesus' love and set out to change his part of the world. On August 24, 1759, a tiny, sickly baby boy was born into a rich family in Yorkshire, England. Nobody could guess the mighty impact this little William Wilberforce would someday have on the British Empire. He grew to be a bright boy who loved school. Suddenly, at age 9, his father died and he was sent off to live with an aunt and uncle far away. His mother was struggling to cope. God had his eyes on this little boy, as he does on every boy and girl. William heard powerful gospel messages in this new place from Methodist preachers. His heart was drawn towards Jesus. But then his mother learned about it. She was a staunch Church of England member, a high-class lady. She didn't want her son getting over religious and all spiritually excited, so she brought him home. Actually determinedly took him to theaters and dances and fancy eating to turn his heart back towards more normal channels. His friends gradually pulled him into night after night of gambling and drinking. Then his grandfather and uncle died and left him a huge inheritance. That just added to his slide away from God. William was brilliant. Even though he partied his way through college, he managed to graduate with hardly any studying. By age 21, he was elected as Member of Parliament in the House of Commons. Can you believe it? Within 3 years, his best friend, William Pitt, became the Prime Minister. It was a quick, flashy jump into the political life of England for both of them. But God had greater plans for William Wilberforce. Soon he went on a tour of Europe with his mother, sister, and a friend named Isaac Milner. They bumped all over the countryside and in and out of cities in a carriage drawn by a horse. They had a lot of time to talk, and often the discussion turned to religion. What was real? What was fake? How could one know the truth? The Holy Spirit worked and worked until William was led to a true and deep conversion. He gave his life entirely to God. His country was full of elaborate big churches, but the vast majority of Christians seemed to be like the whitewashed tombs full of dead men's bones that Jesus had talked about. Wilberforce found something deeper. He wrote, "It is the distinguishing glory of Christianity not to rest satisfied with superficial appearances, but to rectify motives and purify the heart." True conversion transformed his life. Wilberforce would later say, "Can you tell a plain man the road to heaven? Certainly. Turn at once to the right, then go straight forward." And straight forward he went. He left behind his life of partying. He completely turned away from gambling and drinking alcohol. Most importantly, he devoted himself to Jesus and to serving others. He said, "It is the true duty of every man to promote the happiness of his fellow creatures to the utmost of his power." He was ready to give up his popular political career in order to serve God. But then John Newton, the ex-slave trader who turned preacher, urged him to use his immense abilities to serve God through politics. Wilberforce resolved to do so, as he said, with increased diligence and conscientiousness. He would do all he could to make the world a better place. At that time, the British ships carried British goods to Africa. They used those goods to buy slaves. Then they piled as many slaves as they could into ships and crossed the sea to the West Indies. The slaves worked for no pay in terrible conditions to grow sugar, tobacco, and cotton, which were then shipped back to England. That triangle of injustice, brutality, and greed enslaved 11 million Africans over the course of time. 1.4 million slaves died just while traveling in the boats. That was tragic. But England was sleeping through it. Some had the outrageous belief that Africans were less than human. Others believed the English economy simply couldn't survive without slave labor, so it was justifiable. Fortunately, others were incensed by it. That small minority began to pray and act. A man named James Ramsey had been a doctor on the slave ships. Then he became a pastor on the plantations of the islands. He worked, he helped, as long as he could. After 15 years, he went back to England and told the horrors that he had seen. He published a book and people began to wake up. William Wilberforce was one of them. Certain people and friends like Clarkston urged him to use his political position to put forward bills against the slave trade. William himself described what went on in his heart. "So enormous, so dreadful, so irremediable did the slave trade's wickedness appear, that my own mind was completely made up for abolition. Let the consequences be what they would, I from this time determined that I would never rest until I had effected its abolition, its destruction. For the next 26 years, he did not rest, unless he was forced to by his own ulcerated stomach. He worked tirelessly to convince Parliament, men who had been elected by the people who made their money from the slave trade. It was an uphill battle. Others joined, writing, speaking, gathering petitions. Many refused to buy goods that had been produced through slave labor. A touching medallion was created by Josiah Wedgwood that read, "Am I not a man and a brother?" This was sold to raise awareness. It was really the first great human rights grassroots movement. The battle to end the slave trade in England was long and hard. Even when it was officially ended, slavery still existed. It took another 16 years to pass the abolition of slavery. Meanwhile, Wilberforce was busy on many fronts. If you want to read a great book, read Amazing Grace, subtitled William Wilberforce and the Heroic Campaign to End Slavery. It's by Eric Metaxas. Wilberforce tackled the bad working conditions of chimney sweeps and textile workers, prison reform, cruelty to animals, along with many other things. He gave his money and time to the poor. He opened his house wide to people in need. He wanted to see a complete and thorough change of society, bringing the principles of the Bible into every part of life. Finally, on July 26, 1833, it was guaranteed that the bill for the abolition of slavery would be passed. 800,000 African slaves would be freed, primarily in the Caribbean. William Wilberforce died 3 days later. What a life. I have been so moved by his story. Have you? But how moved are we? What difference will it make 3 days from now that we heard this story? Do you know that slavery still exists? England, America, Thailand, and of course all the other countries have long ago abolished slavery, but it still exists. There are approximately 27 million slaves in the world. People forcibly held to work in difficult, if not terrible conditions against their free will. That's more than 2 countries of Cambodia put together. More slaves than ever before in this earth's history. Slaves 200 years ago were worth a lot of money, about $40,000 in today's money, but now a slave is worth only about $90. That means their owners usually don't take very good care of them. It's too easy to buy another. Where are they? The most are in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. But they also may be right around the corner from you. Even in the United States, the government estimates that there are around 60,000 slaves minimum. How do they come? They're offered a job by someone who appears to be a legitimate employment officer. Sounds great, the American dream. What they come to is an entirely different situation. According to freetheslaves.net, they end up in prostitution, domestic service, agriculture, garment sweatshops, food services, entertainment, factories, or landscaping. I like the way the actor who played Wilberforce in the movie Amazing Grace said it. We are too young to realize that certain things are impossible, so we will do them anyway. Is that your resolve? There are some things you can do right now. As always, your money can make a huge difference if you put it in the right place. I personally have seen in Thailand the huge benefits that ADRA makes to prevent young girls from various tribes getting into the jobs like prostitution and slavery where someone has tricked them. It only takes about $150 a year, about $13 a month, to keep a girl in Thailand in school, which is what keeps her out of trouble. You can do this by going online to adrathailand.org and there look for the Keep Girls Safe project. You can also help a lot just by telling lots of people about this problem. Forward my talk to others by passing on the email or posting the YouTube video on your Facebook page. Write something up for your local newspaper. Contact your elected political leaders. Make a noise about this problem. If you don't know much about what's happening locally, check around and you'll find a human rights organization, a homeless shelter, or maybe an immigrant rights group. I learned a lot by looking at freetheslaves.net. Free the Slaves tells the story of Louis Itangwe. He stumbled into slavery in Virginia, United States of America, because right during Thanksgiving dinner, a young girl showed up at the house. She had run away from where she'd been trapped. Louis and his wife knew there was no safe place for her, so immediately they let her stay at their house. She told them about other girls who'd been tricked and trapped. Together, they found a way to sneak them out. They also came to stay at Louis's home. Louis didn't stop with that. He flew to Cameroon, where the girls had been lured to come from. He went to the rescued girls' home villages and showed videotape messages from their girls to their families. Many of the parents broke down and cried. They had been told their daughters were dead. Louis returned with videotapes from the parents, and now he's working with the Maryland Attorney General to prosecute the kidnappers. Louis's life is in danger. But what does he say? I've never felt so excited in my life to be doing what I'm doing. It sounds like he's got some Wilberforce in him. Actually, it sounds like they both had some Jesus in them. Jesus is the great rescuer. He delights to snatch people from the clutches of evil. Will you join the ranks of those who care enough about slavery to act? Together, we can change the world, one life at a time. Let's reach the world ASAP.